Yeah.
Yes, sorry, just starting again. So welcome everyone to the session. We'll be talking about digitization in the housing retrofit, energy retrofit, and climate resilient housing space. We'll be talking about how digitization and technology or digital tools can help and facilitate data collection, housing retrofit design, also work supervision and impact monitoring. We will question during this session, which will roughly last for an hour and 15 minutes maximum, maybe an hour and 10. So we will talk about the potential of these digital tools and platforms that some of our organizations have been developing, but also we will take time to inquire about some of their limitations, perhaps challenges in terms of articulating technology, digitization, and social innovation, as well as potential power imbalances to which we should pay attention to. My name is Bea Varnai. I'm an energy demand program manager at Geres. Geres is a nonprofit organization. We are committed to climate solidarity and energy transition. And amongst other fields, we work in the built environment sector in terms of energy transition and energy efficiency. And I have the pleasure today to moderate this session, which brings together a number of, let's say, peer organizations that work in similar fields, amongst which IIED, Build Change, and my colleague from Geres, who will also speak to one of our projects. So let me jump right into it and introduce you briefly to our panelists. So first up, we will have Marcelle Mardon from IIED. Marcelle is a researcher at the Human Settlements Group of IIED. And she's going to share some of her work that she does with Slumdwellers International, SDI, in strengthening the use and collection of data, and specifically gender disaggregated data on indoor heat in informal settlements. And Marcelle is working on that in Tanzania, Zimbabwe, and Kenya. So welcome, Marcelle. Then we will have our colleagues from Build Change. I will let you introduce Build Change's work more specifically, but we will have Joel speaking to us. Joel is the Vice President of Technology at Build Change, and he's been very much involved in building up and scaling out the BC Tap tool, which he will present to us a bit later in the session. And we will also hear from Ani from Indonesia. She's the country program manager of Build Change in Indonesia, and she will speak to us on a specific application, let's say, of that BC Tap tool and some of its implications in the field. And last up, we will have my colleague Julien Jacquot, who is head of operations at Geres, and he will fill us in about an online digital tool that is built out as a one-stop shop in terms of thermal retrofitting in Mongolia, in our work that we're doing on thermal retrofitting of individual residential housing in Gar districts, which you will hear a bit more about later on. So jumping right into it so that we can make it on time today. Marcelle, over to you. Share a bit about your work together with SDI and IIED, where you're doing data collection that is very community-led and rooted in the communities in the three countries that I've mentioned. Share a bit about what the process is, but also maybe some of the challenges that come with introducing technologies into data collection and evidence and knowledge generation. Over to you, Marcelle.
Great. Thank you so much, Bea. Thanks, Geres, for offering us an opportunity to share the work. I'll just share my slides. I hope I can open them. Oh, that's the wrong one. Here we go. Okay. Can you see?
Yes, we can see the slide. Not yet full screen.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Okay. So cracking into it. So yeah, thank you so much. The work that we've been carrying out recently at IIED around heat measurement is specifically aimed at informal settlements. We worked in 3 different cities. We've been working in Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, Kenya, and in Nairobi, Mathare, and in Zimbabwe, in the secondary city, Kariba. Just to give you a bit of a background for those who may not be familiar with working in informal settlements, some of the issues that we're facing there are beyond looking at overheating cities, is that within those spaces specifically, we have a situation of dense housing, minimal green coverage, housing in itself using materials that are trapping, metal, no ceilings, small windows, and overcrowding. And the hardest challenge that we have with those spaces, we have very little data, which is obscuring some of those realities around heat and humidity. One of the core parts of our work is to work with collective movements. We work with Slum Dwellers International. They are co-producers of the work, and they use collective processes, community-led processes to gather this data. And of course, research plays a very big part in enabling that research that evidence to reach where it needs to go. So in the four main objectives of the work in trying to generate this is to better understand what are the effects of rising heat in informal settlements. We've been looking at those levels, gender differences, and the kind of adaptation methods that communities are already using themselves. Using, as I said before, a participatory method, and then wanting to use new innovative digital processes to track some of the levels indoor as well as outdoor spaces. And so the work that we've been doing has been aimed really at policy change, shifting, and also thinking about the more practical practice and implementation for communities who are obviously who are involved from the outset and want to take this to action almost immediately. And of course, the importance of ensuring that those residents form a part of that planning process at local level as well as national level. So the participatory approach is an important element of the work because it offers for us those local insights and knowledge. It's about data sovereignty as well, the importance of being able to own your own data, building capacity as we move along from the outset through the process, not just in the solutions, and embedding that evidence into formal processes and allowing the prioritization of needs within the community itself. So looking at the three cities, one of the characteristics of the study itself, we had very few buttons. It was a pilot. So we had 5 buttons located across 2 settlements within Nairobi and Dar es Salaam, Congo, if some of you might be familiar with some of those spaces. And then in Kariba, we decided to look at 3 different settlements, given that the housing typologies were very, very different. The surveys were quite extensive. We had between 486 respondents to 300 respondents, and then we had focus group discussions, which allowed us to bring in a gendered and intersectional perspective. Several of our stakeholders and new stakeholders that came into the project were looking at Met offices. We approached them, and also TEMU, which is a private regional climate data gathering organization, which I'll speak to later. So the methodology alongside the formal was to look at those, speak to Met offices. We had peer-to-peer learning spaces across different communities and across those 3 different cities. We co-produced the questionnaire right from the outset, and the gender responsive lens was put into that questionnaire almost from day one. And we used as a new part of our data gathering, the iButtons, which we used, trained all of our community members as well. Community researchers and youth were also involved in gathering that data. And we shared our findings and the readings across the community, who were very, very interested to understand what these monitors were doing in the homes and what they were telling them, their neighbors. Lots of people in the community actually wanted to have some of those devices themselves and were asking if they could also be involved later in the project. So just to home in a little bit on the iButtons itself, for those who are more technical or technically orientated, these are called the Hygrocron DS 1923. They were sensors that allowed us to provide something that was robust, that would give us reliable data. It had been used elsewhere in other research spaces before. It would allow us to have data readings from temperature as well as humidity from 1 to 100%. They could be tested in situ. That was part of a problem that we are looking at now as we move forward on a weekly basis. And we managed to do this study over a 6-week period. The buttons had to be very specifically located. They were located in main spaces. They had to be located at least a minimum of 1 meter high off the ground and 500 centimeters above the ceiling to ensure accurate reading. And we were able to compare that to trans-African readings that were not located in the informal settlements, and that's a challenge that we identify as we move forward. But there were only 2 available to us, and that was close to Dar es Salaam and close to the settlements in Nairobi. The readings were continuous, and we had to go to site every week and draw the data from them, load them into the laptop, and then go away and put them into Excel spreadsheets that would allow us to read them. The gender responsive and intersectional approach of the work also meant that we were able to think very specifically about what were the differentiated differences and impacts, experiences, and responses coming out of the settlement. So from the outset, we worked together with the communities to identify what needed to be considered within the surveys that were very specific, specifically orientated to the care work, the livelihoods, the day-to-day domestic roles played by different people in the household. We had specific focus group discussions. We then went away and had specific training around thinking about the gender data gap analysis, and also continuous peer-to-peer exchanges across 6 different countries in the SDI affiliate network, discussing these issues about how we wanted to carry this work into the network beyond this particular piece of work. And coming out of that for publication, we have some case studies, which I will speak to in a minute. So the overall design approach we captured across 4 different spaces with the I buttons, the settlement surveys, using the questionnaires, we had the focus group discussions, and we had our stakeholder interviews. And that allowed us to capture data from 4 different spaces. I don't have time to go into the details of the readings, but just some of the highlights from our readings. What was indicated in the short spell that we were able to use these sensors showed that in Matare in Nairobi, we noted a difference of indoor and outdoor heat going up to a maximum of 9 degrees Celsius. And this wasn't even in the hottest period of the year. Some of the variations were highest at night, where there was a lag in temperature reduction, indicating that the homes were trapping that heat. And there were patterns of chronic exposure to heat and humidity as well. While we were quite new to this research, we were left to understand that this prolonged heat stress was going from day into night. And for people who were not leaving their homes, like women, this was becoming a health issue. So some of the findings that were more specific to the actual housing itself indicated that 75% of the residents were experiencing health issues, that they were having to consider trade-offs. 6 of them were using their income to try to keep cool within their homes. There were very limited and short-term coping mechanisms, with 80% of them saying that their homes were very uncomfortably hot. There were some dangerous humidity levels between 77 and 70 degrees, which is above the 60% threshold for comfort. There was mold on the walls. There were issues around respiratory disease, and there was a gradual degradation of the physical integrity of the dwellings as well. The residents indicated through the research that they felt that building typology and the materials were a key determinant in part of that heat exposure. Furthermore, there's also issues around what to do about the risks, limited knowledge about what could be done, what solutions could be brought forward that would support the cooling of their homes. bearing in mind that finance, skills, and secure tenure are huge factors in how communities can find coping mechanisms. On gender and intersectional, there were lots of invisible burdens identified. Our work across the 3 cities identified 3 priority spaces that they went on to study, and I can give you some of those publication links after this. For example, in Tanzania, they identified that cooking activities within the home were adding heat to those issues, and women who were bent over coal and charcoal stoves all day were being exposed to incredible levels of temperatures. Also, there weren't adequate spaces for cooking, so many women in Tanzania in particular are cooking in corridors. Cooking outside culturally is often frowned upon just because you have neighbors so close by. People prefer to cook indoors so no one would see what they were cooking. In other spaces in Kenya, for example, they prioritize thinking about menstruation health, women identifying that the heat was actually making times of the month much more difficult to deal with, and connecting the two. There's a further study on that one. And then in Zimbabwe, there was also an identification where access to water and water infrastructure away from homes was also complicating lives, meaning that women were having to go out at cooler evenings to collect water, or having to collect water more than once a day. And that was actually creating a human-wildlife conflict issue. And I just have a quote here very quickly where it says, from one of the women in the focus group discussion, saying, "When there's a lot of heat, I get sleepless nights. I usually take time and go outside to get some fresh air. For the kids, they do sweat so much while sleeping, and they get skin rashes all over the skin, and we rush them to the hospital for medication. The rashes become itchy, and when scratched, they become wounds." Our studies also indicate that in our nighttime studies that women often suffer from sleep deprivation, taking care of their families instead of themselves. And there's also a huge problem of normalization of heat, where people just become so accustomed to it that it just becomes something they live with. Just a very quick overview about the building materials and construction techniques. Because it was a small study, we didn't have an opportunity to do an in-depth study on the typologies, but what we did do is start making an indication with the community about some of the materials that the housing were in the 3 different settlements used. Most of them use corrugated metal sheets across all 3 settlements, which of course becomes helps retain heat in homes as well. Some had internal sealing, but there were very few. In Dar es Salaam, only 40% of the housing used ceilings. Walls and floors were made from cement, bricks, stones. Interestingly enough, windows are a big issue. It would seem to be a natural space for encouraging retrofitting in homes, but security in many settlements means people don't open their windows, neither in the day nor in the night. And so those houses have no adequate form of ventilation. And then we're also talking about very high occupation levels, where you have in some spaces 20 square meters of room for 4 to 5 people occupation. So these were some of the more specific challenges from Tanzania, and I've mentioned some of them already. Only 40% had ceilings. Some of the external factors were also a consideration. Proximity to the coast, creating humidity. Dump sites also were considered as generating heat, which were adding to some of these issues. Occupancy levels and limited ventilation. And the tendency, of course, is that people would sleep outside. This, of course, for women was much more of a challenge, often frowned upon, or even in danger of creating issues around security for them, gender-based violence, and so on. There was also some of the communities talked about how they would need to get up and shower in the night. Obviously, this for women also means needing more water within the household and having to collect more water to make sure that there is adequate water for additional showers at night. And just to give you some other indications, in Mathare in Kenya, similar issues in terms of density, ventilation, and metal roofing. But some of the coping strategies are people starting to identify that they needed to have some sort of ceiling or insulation against the heat from those materials. So started to use old sacks, plastic carpets, even newspapers around on the insides of these homes to kind of create a buffer to the heat. Some are even considering putting plants on roofs to provide some kind of natural cooling, plywood on walls, and even raising some of the floor levels to try and create some kind of cooling. At least that's a consideration. So this is some of the images of the houses in Zimbabwe. As you can see, they're completely metal, just completely metal blocks, roofing and walls. And in Kariba, the temperatures can go up to 40 degrees in some seasons. So this is a real issue where if you cannot open your window, and you can see the size of the window in the lower photo to the left, people didn't want to open their windows because in Kariba you have this conflict, human-wildlife conflict, which means wild animals can get in at night, snakes, etc. And even sitting outside for women in particular is a problem because you can be attacked by wild animals as well. So some of the limitations of the study, as Bear was suggesting earlier, is that obviously this was just a trial, it was a pilot, so the research obviously needs to go deeper. This is our plan. But the limitations, of course, of having the eye buttons is while it allowed us to kind of co-design and co-produce in a participatory way, just having 5 buttons means, you have the hands-on with the community, and it allowed us to kind of work with them to understand the processes, which could be quite technical at times, especially in the analysis phase. Also trying to get adequate external readings. We had readings from weather stations that were not in the settlement, and that tends to be the case as well, while we're trying to verify that these are urban heat islands, not having specific temperatures outside that can then be influenced by other environmental issues is also a challenge. And some of the other limitations as well, I think, comes from the need to take time within the process to allow people to understand what these eye buttons are. Many members of the communities were quite suspicious of the eye buttons, and they felt that maybe we were trying to listen in on them. It was an invasion of their privacy. And then again, selecting of the community members, some asking why are others getting and why are others not. And so trying to build into the process, and that takes time, obviously, an understanding of what these new devices can do for them. So for our next steps, we have the opportunity to take this project into a new space. We're going to be working in Mombasa, and there we hope to work more closely with Met offices so that this data can be verified as evidence and in a more scientific-based or formal spaces. We'd like to work closely together with them. And then looking more also at the practical and low-cost interventions. We'd like to look at how some of those housing typologies within Mombasa can be retrofitted to fit some of those interventions that we see coming through from our colleagues later. One of the advantages of working with SDI also is they have community finance mechanisms, which we want to tap into to see whether communities can also build some resilience and sustainability, looking at blended financing or city funds, where money and resources are pooled across community and local authorities. And again, the gender responsive approach, we are also looking to identify looking further into those gaps that we identified around heat, around livelihood, and care, the care burden. So yeah, basic introduction to the work that we've been doing. Thank you so much, Bea.
Thank you, Marcelle, for sharing this. I believe IIED also published a few interesting papers on this, so feel free to drop them in the chat. And thanks for showcasing us this mixed methodology, which I think is very interesting and applicable, also to other settings in terms of merging sort of community-based qualitative data with these low-cost, simple data loggers. and to generate data and evidence on thermal comfort and heat stress, especially in indoor environments, which is a big like sort of data gap, right, that is there, specifically in informal settlements as well. So thank you, Marcelle. Moving to, let's say, to implementing and designing solutions. Now, from assessment to solutions, I'd like to give the floor to Joël and Annie from Build Change, so that you give us an overview of your work in terms of leveraging digitization technology to accelerate climate resilient housing upgrades and construction. I believe specifically in Indonesia, where you're really speaking from, Annie. And yes, over to you. We're curious to hear about BC-TAP and how you're pairing that with local expertise and technical support.
Great, thank you so much. Good morning from Brooklyn, New York. Hopefully you can see my screen. My name is Joel Herold. I'm the Vice President of Technology. My background is in software engineering. And I've been at Build Change now for over 3 years. And I'll let Annie introduce herself a little bit later. I will give a little bit of information on BC-TAP. BC-TAP is a product that we've been working on for many years at Build Change. And I'll go through a very short demo just because we have limited time and show you the mobile application and how some of the data is processed. So what is BC-TAP? It is a flexible modular platform. BC-TAP stands for Build Change Technical Assistance Platform. It's an meant to be an end-to-end solution that pairs different types of technology with subject matter expertise to take resilient housing programs to scale. So BC-TAP includes a lot of different types of features. We're working on many different features to fit specific programs all across the world. And these types of features are related to project management, to budgeting, to reporting, and especially to design, where Build Change expertise of over 20 years with our expertise in the technical area when we talk about engineering at Build Change, it's never about software engineering. It's about structural and civil engineering. So we're supporting disaster prevention and post-disaster housing programs. BC-TAP is a mobile application and also a desktop application. You can access it on the web. And the mobile application is meant to be a data collection. And as I mentioned, we've been working across the world. Right now, BC-TAP is being used in 6 different countries. And we work on this 80% normalized process and 20% customized. So customizing it based off of the context of the program, of the country, of the specific requirements. And as I mentioned, we've been working on BC-TAP for many years. This version that we have right now is just one of several versions that we've worked on before. And it's meant to cover the 6-step construction value chain with a specific focus on the design aspect of the construction value chain. That's where we feel that we've added a lot of value because of course there's many different types of data collection tools out there. And this is a very quick snapshot of the design process. We look at the design process in somewhat of a 3-tiered position because depending on the project's requirements, we might need more construction details or less construction details, given the housing typology, given the actual situation. And the demo is focused on this tier 1 where we're doing prescriptive retrofitting. And we're able to, based off of the assessment data that we get in the field, we're able to excuse me, we're able to do an in-field assessment and do the design also in the field. The mobile application is offline first, so you can collect the data offline because we know that that's something that is very common in our space. And then to do some of the work, you do need an online connection and syncing that data. And so this is the most complex part of a design process, where here we're collecting the data in BC-TAP. We may, depending on the requirements again, we may add another application. This is a magic plan. And then depending on if there is a requirement to submit the designs, then we add in Autodesk Revit. And through this, we've developed APIs to work with these different applications. And then all of this information is accessible in the web. So I will quickly go to the demo. And what I'm doing here is, let me wake up my phone. I'm mirroring the BC-TAP app on my phone. And the BC-TAP app is there is localization capabilities. I'm just demoing it in English right now, but of course, we want to meet the end user, whether that end user is a microfinance officer, a builder, a homeowner. We want to meet them where they are, of course. And this right here is basically the home screen of a project, where you would have several different forms. In this project here, we have, as you can see, four different forms. I'll jump into one of the forms, and I have some test data here that I've already filled out. We have all kinds of different functionalities in terms of geolocation, taking specific pictures and uploading those. And depending on the project requirements, there's a lot of different type of data that would be collected. In this case, we have a specific thermal comfort section where we're asking many different types of questions. And I won't go through the actual content, but so once this information is collected, then you can see that there's a little check mark here. That means that it's been synced. So all of this so far has been able to, you would be able to collect this data offline, and then you need to sync this online. And then the design part of this is based off of the information that is collected. We're able to auto-generate a scope of work. And the user is able to sit with the homeowner and go through the process, kind of determine what their budget is. In this case, we're working, this is the case with Indonesia, working with Komida, the Microfinance Institute. And the homeowner is able to add in what they would like to do. We have a list of materials that's generated based off of each action item. And then once you've selected those items, you can see here down in the bottom that it is updating the actual price, and these are in Indonesian rupiah. And then here we have the bill of quantities. So based off of what I've selected in the scope of work, this gives you a full list of the quantities of materials. We're also able to add in any type of labor costs, and that was specifically a question in this form. The forms themselves are meant to be, generated based off of the needs of the project. So I think that is mostly it from the demo. I will jump back in and hand it over to Annie to talk specifically about our work in Indonesia. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. And would you mind to help me in guiding the slide? Thank you.
Yes.
Hi everyone, I'm Ani. I'm the country manager for program in Indonesia. And in this session, we would like to share a bit on our climate resilient housing financing portfolio in the country. Bill Chains in Indonesia has been collaborating with Komida. Komida is an all-woman member saving loan cooperative. And so since 2024, we provided climate adaptation and resilient technical advisory for their members. And currently, we are jointly implementing the incremental climate adaptation loan programs. We call it ICAL, to target heat stress adaptation and calibrate the financing specification to be able to match the repayment capabilities of the low-income members. And so we have been designing intervention that will enable the members to do affordable climate adaptation investment, especially to reduce their house exposure to extreme heat events and providing technical assistance through the BCTAP. And since exactly a year ago, May 2025, ICAL has been piloted roll out by Komida, and so far nearly 500 of its members have taken up the product. And next slide, please, Joe. Thank you. And so in this resilient housing finance program, Bill Chains deliver the technical assistance to MFI partner through the series of key phases of activities, usually implemented between up to a 12-month period from market assessment up to the scale-up stage. So we started with conducting market assessment with the MFI, which typically involves a demand survey, such as collecting the willingness to pay, the reported experiencing heat stress, and we also collect the relevant housing data and the materials that are available in the area, as well as the skill of the local builders. And once we got sense on the need and the willingness to pay, we started to formulate the several heat adaptation intervention and tested them to confirm the effectiveness and the applicability. And once it's being completed with the MFI, we formulated together the product architecture as well as the financing terms and conditions. And the next phase will be the capacity building, where we train the MFI staff, especially the frontline officer or loan officer. And so we collaborate with the MFI to develop the customized awareness and marketing materials. And then we train them on how to effectively use the materials to engage their members. And the training definitely includes how to conduct home assessment and deliver the whole process through BCTAP. And after that, Bill Chains and the MFI jointly implement the pilot to roll out to selected branches and refine the products as it goes. And so during the pilot rollout, there are a few, it involves end-to-end implementation, or we call it client's journey. So it begins with client awareness, because we want to make sure that that there's demand and there should be someone who wanted to having a better homes. And so through the weekly meetings within the MFI members, so the trained loan officer usually started to be engaged, and the members learn and recognize the need for healthier and better thermal comfort. And then they were started to introduce to the product. And then the interested clients are then oriented on the full process, starting with the home assessment using BCTAP. And then based on that, the MFI officer, still using BCTAP, will try to advise the necessary improvement and to present the options aligned with the client's repayment capacity. And once the loan terms and agree upon, and then the funds are dispersed, and then the last one concluded with the close out. in that sense that the MFI officer will check whether the fund have been used for proper heat adaptation implementation. And then at the end of the pilot rollout, we're going to be conducting a post-project evaluation to assess the outcomes and understand better and extend to how effective ICAL is to improve the thermal comfort and to what extent it could contribute to the health, the livelihood, and the energy efficiency outcomes. And the next slide, please, Jo. Thank you. And so, so in this single slide, we would like to point out how leveraging digital technology, in our case, BCTAP, is pivotal for supporting homeowners in making better decisions for their homes. So the most successful and sustainable housing programs are driven by homeowners themselves. And so by channeling resources towards those decision-making activities that raising the homeowner awareness, building their capacity, and providing training, we would like to enable homeowners to invest in decision equity, shifting the power to them. And so BuildChain's technical assistance platform in this case is able to helping us making resilient housing more accessible and to streamline the provision of proper resilient housing at scale. And BCTAP making resilient more accessible and affordable because we involve the whole process starting from designing up to ensuring that the utilization of the fund is being used properly and rightfully. The next slide, please. Thank you. And so we currently already entering, we finished the pilot rollout and we are entering our very first scale up phase. And in this process, we started to continue partnering with the MFI and they started to scale up to a few more branches. So during pilot, it has been introduced in 90 localities or branches and now over 150 across country from Java, Kalimantan, Sulawesi, and East Nusa Tenggara. And so through that, we hopefully, and we currently in the process of continue providing support on technical assistance through BCTAP. And the final slide, Jo, thank you. And so lastly, I would like to conclude our highlights on the climate pilot rollout. So we're happy to see the some of the impacts that we captured during the pilot. 67% of survey ICAL user report experiencing an improved thermal comfort, not just on the house indoor temperature, and also among those who reported some improvement in terms of health aspect, reduced health issues, and also reported less issues on livelihood due to they are unable to work due to heat indoor. And so this pilot demonstrates that the low-income household can and they do repay the loans, and 0% non-performing loans has been recorded. And now we are currently entering a scale-up phase. And however, we would like to continue solidify two things. The technical efficacy case. So we would like to really build a rigorous and strong evidence linking ICAL product to beyond just comfort, but also on the health, on the productivities and energy efficiency and the economic impacts. And then we also would like to solidify the commercial case to build a self-sustaining multi-institutional market for climate resilient home improving financing. And so that concludes our overview of our work in Indonesia. And I'll now turn it over to Joel. Thank you.
Thanks, Annie. Yes, I only have one more slide. As I mentioned, we're adding new features to BCTAP all the time. So this is just a general scope of what we're working on in 2026. The Cisco Foundation has granted us some funds to work on a design library. So right now, BCTAP is really meant for that progressive retrofitting that I mentioned, a lot of the preventative work, but we want to certainly get into supporting new construction better with BCTAP. We have done that in the past. So this is something that we're working on now. And then we have been, Patrick J. McGovern Foundation has funded us for the past 2 years to work on a generative AI chatbot. And that's one of the main projects that we're working on too, to add assistance through generative AI. And that is continuing to be developed. And then we're also working in Colombia on a community-based organizations, working with community-based organizations, very similar approach to the Microfinance Institute work that we've been doing in Indonesia and the Philippines. So I know that we've gone over time, and there's never enough time in the day. So thanks, Bia, for this opportunity, and I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Annie and Joel. I know that was a very brief introduction and there's a lot more to say, but thank you. And also feel free to, drop any website or anything you would like to share with participants if they want to look for more information about these programs and the tool itself. So thank you. I guess now we're moving to our last speaker, Julien. We've heard about digitization in terms of facilitating knowledge, data generation, but also access to technical assistance, upgrading solutions, as you shared, Annie, from Indonesia, also finance. At Geres, we've been working on a very connected complementary field, let's say, in terms of leveraging digitization as a role in its role to facilitate the coordination between stakeholders, and more specifically linking demand and offer in the thermal retrofitting sector. And we'll move to Julien. Thank you for pulling up the slides, who will speak about our work, Geres' work in Mongolia in the thermal retrofitting sector. Over to you, Julien.
Thank you very much. Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. Just word about me and Geres. So I'm the director of operations at Geres. I've been working there for over 20 years. Geres has been involved in energy efficient retrofitting of houses since the 1980s, I believe. First in Ladakh in India for 20 years, 30 years, then Afghanistan, where I started to work with Geres on housing. And then we have expanded in cold areas of Tajikistan and Mongolia, as I will speak now, and now we are slightly moving also to expand our works on warmer environments, namely Benin, Morocco, Cambodia, or Myanmar. So it starts to be an extensive portfolio of projects. And what is interesting, and as you will be able to compare with what Build Change has been doing, the issues of thermal efficiency, whether in cold or warm areas, are very similar. And I think the approaches that we are using to tackle them are very comparable as well. So now coming to our project, Abdullah Shidal platform in Mongolia. Just let me quickly picture you about the situation. So Mongolia is a very cold country, experiencing very harsh winters, like minus 35 degrees, with 9 months of heating during the year, from like mid-September to mid-June, where it's only like 3 months where there is no freezing at night. It's sparsely populated, but about 50% of the 3.5 million population lives in the capital city of Ulaanbaatar, which has been growing steadily for the last 20 years. About 40% of the households live in Geres districts. So what is Geres districts? Is basically you have two types of built environments in Ulaanbaatar. You have blocks which are connected to the trunk infrastructure, which is like the providing centralized heating systems. But half of half of 30% of the population lives also on detached house, which they call ger. Ger is the local name for yurt, so the felt tent that they traditionally use. People are entitled in Mongolia, because it's vast, to actually claim plots of lands of about like 200 to 400 square meters, very legally. So there is no issue with informality in there, but it's unplanned, and so people first start to put their yurt, and then progressively transform it into a small self-built house with very limited thermal efficiency. And people heat their houses with coal mostly, and that means that these in winter, the pollution from these coal-fired stoves are very important, amounting for more than 50% of their pollution in the city in winter. That makes Ulaanbaatar one of the most polluted cities in the world. There could be other ways of heating, for instance, with electricity and the likes, but the issue is that also the electricity generation is mostly based on coal-fired power plants. So even though it might be like less polluting from a PM perspective, nevertheless, it emits a lot of CO2. So here again, the necessity to embark on a retrofitting journey, which is a path that hasn't been really much followed by governments until the last 4 or 5 years, before they seek to put everyone in huge blocks, but it didn't amount to the challenge, actually. So it was useful, but not enough. And so we start to start proposing retrofitting solutions, not only building new building blocks. How we do that? So we've started what we call switch off air pollution projects, started back in 2018, the second phase being completed this year. Basically, so focusing on Ulaanbaatar, the biggest city, and more recently Tarkhanul, which is the second or third city in Mongolia, with two types of solutions: so insulation, roof, walls, foundations, changing of windows, etc., and providing also energy efficient solutions such as heat pump PV systems or blueprints for houses. We originally had one way of going envisioned, that was a market-based delivery model, like bringing all stakeholders of the construction sector, from the homeowners to the builders to financial institutions, governments, local institutions, providers of solution materials, construction companies, and construction brigades, as they call it, like basically groups, informal groups of daily workers doing construction work, which is a bit the traditional way people build in these Geres districts. But we find out that this is, even though that this is promising on the one hand, the fact that a lot of people cannot afford full retrofitting also brought us to consider developing a package of simple solutions for self-help renovation, basically, which is on the one hand a product of appeal for people, to convince them that retrofitting would be a useful solution, not only providing better stoves or better access to electricity, but starting to take their journey on the renovation path, and also a more affordable way of already having some improvements in their house. Basically, the market-based delivery model goes this way, and I'll come back to it because it's the standard way that we're doing, quite comparable, I believe, to what BuildChain is doing. So first, we have like campaigns of awareness raising, etc., and we have a call center where people can call and book technical assessment of their house, which is providing recommendations on what kind of work to undergo. And then people can either finance themselves, either go through microfinance institutions or banks who are providing green loans, And when we started the project, a lot of banks in Mongolia had loans that were at better terms than traditional finance, but actually for retrofitting, but they lacked the capacity to assess whether the proposed works would actually reach the threshold that was necessary for the loan to be granted. So that helped them basically grants these green loans. Then whenever finance is obtained, can contract with the brigades. So brigades are, as I said, these groups of workers, construction workers, which we have worked with also to build the capacities and make them able to actually perform the insulation works or retrofitting works that we are promoting. Then going through suppliers, we have worked a lot extensively also with the suppliers of materials in the country, so we can somehow certify that those are the right products that are used. Then performing the works, controlling the forms and what's been done and the works that have been done through the energy audit certificate, which then allows for the last disbursement of the green loans whenever this happens. And then, of course, this is highly depending on the situation of the households of the customers. Sometimes they can do, and we encourage full retrofitting, but we know that considering the purchasing capacity of the household, sometimes they cannot. So we also advise what kind of works to perform first, and maybe what kind of works could be performed later. And then a simple solution package. So basically a DIY method to insulate the house with very simple instructions and very affordable material, without the need to actually hire any external workforce, focusing on window, door, floor, chimney, and wall, and improving air tightness and these kind of things. Plus a lot of manuals, instruction videos. A lot of people are actually connected to social media, so we had big campaigns around that. People can perform it on their own. So that this is the second arm of the work. So far, just a few figures. So far, the simple solution has been implemented by over 6,000 people, and to encourage people to actually do their retrofitting. Sorry, we've worked with around 900 households to which we provided materials on the condition that they actually disseminated the information to their neighbors, so that was quite useful. We've trained about over 500 workers and volunteers. We're partnering with 8 financial institutions and trained 200 loan officers, etc. All in all, to also highlight the difference between market-based versus simple solution. Although we have managed to encourage about over 6,000 self-made retrofitting, we are just short of 300 retrofits from with the market-based solution. The idea now is really to go at scale, one step further, and scale that up. Because if we want to really tackle the issue from an household perspective or from a collective perspective, when we speak about air pollution, we cannot be happy with only 300 households. What we want to do is to use a one-stop shop approach. What's a one-stop shop? It's something that's done quite extensively across Europe. I believe you can find that also in other countries, but that's something we're a bit familiar with because Geres is also active in France on the issue of energy poverty in housing. And well, I should say one-stop shops are a very trendy solution throughout Europe to encourage retrofitting. Basically, what that is, it's an integrated model whereby a homeowner is guided through the entire renovation process, from like when it's raising initial energy audit to final certificates through only one single point of contact. So it means that the homeowners doesn't have to go individually through each and every stakeholder of the retrofitting journey, architects, engineers, bankers, auditors, sometimes institutions where you have like subsidies to do your retrofitting. The one-stop shop bundled it into one single platform and go along with the homeowners throughout the journey. So Dula and Chiddle, so the Dula Alga platform is a digital platform whereby we have tried to bundle all these elements and make them at least visible and allow the households to connect to the service providers to gather all the information about the services, the technical recommendations, and possibilities of financing. Okay, this is how the platform looks. So of course, if you log into it, it will be in Mongol language because it's for Mongolia, obviously. Where you can find, so you can see here on the top every steps of the renovation journey, what kind of products, what kind of consultants, so it means like builders that you can find, what kind of green loan you can apply to, into ideally one single platform. You have also a calculator, so I believe it's not as developed as the one as BCTAP, but a calculator to actually see what kind of improvements you can do in your house to get a better energy performance, and then you will have technical recommendations and pricing and the likes. So basically, here's how it goes. The small graph I showed earlier. So a call center down to energy audits, list of suppliers, information on green loans, connection with the workers, and then certification. All that you can find the necessary information throughout the website. Now our ambition, as I mentioned here, you know, like you have the call center. I think we had over 10,000, I believe, calls in this center, and only the transformation rate from like the original interest for homeowners down to renovation is very low. So the big challenge is not much about now like people being aware of the issue, and when it's minus 35 degrees at winter, well, you don't really need to be aware of the issue of heating, but then and how to transform that into actual retrofittings. So our ambition now is to scale up this platform. So ensuring that the households are routed towards the appropriate renovation pathway, ensuring that all the financing is actually avoided, and that credit officers, banks, etc., can propose appropriate products, can understand the situation of the households, possibly can lower the criteria for for granting loans. Also, reducing renovation costs. This is a huge issue. Basically, Mongolian households have very little purchase capacity, so we can, of course, find credit options, etc., but streamlining the processes for renovation, bundling sometimes maybe, or aggregating the purchase of materials, etc., is also a way of lowering the costs, ensuring then also the traceability and coordination and performance of this journey through a CRM system. So all that would require digitization. So that's what we are embarking on now. But it requires a bit more than what we've been doing so far. So we need interoperability between public databases and banks. We need public support, and that has been better recently than it used to be when we started these projects. And we also have, so far, Geres is a French international NGO that has been carrying the whole platform and approach, and we need that to be taken over by local institutions to actually be able to scale up. So that's where we want to do now. Okay, so this is basically the customer journey that we really envision to do. Activation to gather trust and interest, prepare probably credibly what's to be done and how much it will cost. Then making sure this is accessible through financing and delivery and monitored to ensure satisfaction, not only of the homeowners, who are the most important, obviously, but also satisfaction of the policies, satisfaction of the banks who needs to actually justify why they granted green loans and the likes. So that's a bit the value proposition we intend to develop. So just a few examples of, one-stop shops. This one is HomeGrid. This is in Brussels, where I live. This is another in France. You have France Canot. So this is the platform. So you can find an advisory support to energy renovation, to subsidy for co-ownership buildings. So different types of situation, and all through one platform. You have this OpenGela in Spain. I think we are part of a network that's called EU Peers, where there are over 64 one-stop shops in Europe that are participating into that. So basically, it's a model that gathers already quite a lot of experience. We'd like to develop in Mongolia. Okay, that was very short. I haven't been into very, very much detail, but don't hesitate to ask questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julien. Thank you so much for speeding up the presentation. And so we're right on time. We still have another 5 minutes for question and answers. I see some of the questions already in the chat. So if anyone else wants to raise their hand and ask a question directly, please do. We still have a few minutes. And in the meantime, I think there was one for you, Marcelle. I don't know if you've seen that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I have. Thanks, Herman. I was going to try and write it, but it was taking a bit longer. Yeah, so just to respond to Herman. So basically, this has just been a pilot, Herman. So we only really had 5 iButtons available to us in each of those settlements. In Matare and in Combo, there are very specific typologies of housing that we were looking at. Really in terms of size, in terms of use of materiality. In Kariba, there were 3 different types of typologies, and so we aimed to have at least 3 different settlements that housed that had different types of housing. One being sort of constructed out of timber, others more concrete blocks. What we tried to do with the 5, where the typologies were similar, is to try and think about some of the criteria we should be looking at in future. So like some of the external factors, like proximity to the coast or inland, or proximity to dump sites. The spaces that communities feel was influencing some of the issues they are experiencing on heat. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Marcelle.
Just to say, Bear, one more. And in the next project, we're aiming to have 50 iButtons. And in that study, I think we'll be able to look more at different typologies of housing to try and get a better grasp of what materials, space heights, windows, ventilation, what those are doing on the readings. Thanks.
Thank you, Marcelle. I see Caroline's hand is up. Over to you.
Hi. Just really wanted to compliment all the speakers. It was just so lovely to hear about these innovations. So we work in a network that works with informal worker organizations. So they're often living in informal settlements, but we're kind of looking at with the different lens and just seeing the climate impacts, particularly following where innovations are happening globally. And I've got a tricky question for whoever's willing to answer it. And it's partly because we're navigating this tricky kind of financing space. So our membership-based organizations are saying, we know what kind of infrastructure needs we have for greater climate resilience, but where should we be looking? So, I know that all of you are looking in different spaces about how to finance and scale innovations, and we know those innovations are desperately needed. But if you were to kind of summarize it in a nutshell, where are you seeing the spaces of hope for tapping into the kind of resources that we need? And I suppose we're all very mindful of the political moment that we're operating in, where the donor landscape is brutal. Is it the development banks? Are you looking to the state? Where are the gaps in the climate financing space? So I know it's a tricky one, but love to hear from all of you.
Who'd like to take on that one?
This is super tricky. I mean, we're all fighting with the same thing. I think our strategy, a little bit like for Mongolia at least, through the scale up, is also to say, okay, so far we were lucky enough to gather the interest from some donors, and now we really are into convincing the Mongolian government to actually allocate funds the way some countries would do in Europe. For retrofitting and for management of the platform, and engaging through the private sector to go along with that. And when we speak about their own funds, it also could be through sovereign borrowing. So we are starting discussions with the development banks about it, and I think that probably is one way of doing. And I believe, I mean, for us, and it's not a strategy that's been tested, it's just what we're trying to do now, is really to see, to work with development banks and governments to to show them that, okay, it's not like NGO slash beatniks and hippies works, but it's more professional, private sector, etc. Because I also consider that to a very large extent, the work that we're doing doesn't really need to change a lot, but maybe in the phrasing there is a lot of things to do, just to give the perception that we can work with strong private sector development things, and I believe there is a lot of monies to be taken that out. That might be a bit cynical, but that's one way of thinking about it.
Do we have any more time left to answer, Bea? I'm just looking at the time.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, just very, very quickly. So I think, Caroline, you're probably already quite familiar with the way SDI works. We're looking at this particular project, the next one in Mombasa, a kind of blended finance, which is basically using local savings, tapping into city funds. So that means that it's not just thinking about only the actual finance part of it, but what contributions can be made towards the infrastructure from local authorities. And then also looking at external funding that can tap into that and allow the fund itself to be rotated, kind of like a bigger loan scheme, which has already been tested in some cities. And we're looking to test it out with the building materials and construction work as well in this space too.
And I would briefly say, yeah, from build change, from my perspective, from the technology perspective, I don't have a whole lot of experience in the finance sector. So my colleague Ariana had to drop off early. But for us, I mean, we're looking for, this is a great space, I feel, because it's great to share each other's work, to see where there are opportunities for collaboration, to drive down costs and become more efficient. Yeah, I think we're looking across, private and public and also philanthropic donations to continue the work.
Thank you all. Yeah, I guess the challenge is also in terms of articulating these initiatives with public policies, and as Julien said, one of the part of the work is to convince that this is not some niche opportunity, but rather should be mainstreamed across the housing sector and construction sectors also more broadly. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. Thank you for those who connected today, and as we said in the chat, we will share the recording, but also some key documentation. So hopefully we can continue the conversation. Thank you so much and take care. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to you as well, Bea. Thank you.